So it's been a long road to get here, as a lot of people who've known me have known. I've been working on this a long time. I started actually many years ago, about 6 years ago, and I wanted to kind of show what the process felt like. So it sometimes feels like you're on one side of a great chasm and you're trying to bring something to the other side, and it's impossible. And this is a visual representation of what it looks like, where you're there on one side saying, please publish my book, and there's this moat of indifference, and it's just not happening. So anyway, so it finally happened. It took a long time, and I'm really glad about that. Okay, so the story begins, actually, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself first. I grew up here in Memphis, and I went to campus school, which is at the University of Memphis campus, and we'll show you, next slide is the second grade photo, which my father found today. Thank you for that. This is me in the front row, and there's a specific reason why I show you this, and that is because the Book of Isaias is about changing demographics of this city and the country. And at this time, we had a couple of Asian students, but everyone else was either African American or white. There were no Hispanic students in my school, at least in my class that I remember. Maybe one or two. But so the Church of the Resurrection is where my family went to worship. This is in the Fox Meadows, Hickory Hill area, and this is where I first started to learn about Hispanic culture, because in the 1990s there were a large number of immigrants from Mexico who were arriving in the neighborhood, and so this led me to start learning Spanish. And my father's a professor of German, so I was studying German first, and then I started doing Spanish as well. So this is a little dark, it's a little difficult to see, but I'm there on the right. I'm wearing a rain hood, and I'm interviewing a farmer. This was in 2004 in central Mexico. And back here you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but there's a horse. He was plowing his field with a horse. I was on assignment at the time for a newspaper in Alabama, the Birmingham Post-Herald, and we went to a town where a lot of people had come from that town to Alabama. This guy, who's back there, Mauricio Calvo, is responsible for this whole thing. Because in 2010, actually in this very shopping center, we had lunch at Panera Bread, and we were talking about things. For those who don't know Mauricio, he is from, actually kind of met him at church, and he also is now head of Latino Memphis. We were at lunch, and he said he was concerned about immigrants' kids, the children of immigrants, and he said, "¿Qué nos espera?" What awaits us? So I started looking into facts and figures about immigrants' children. Basically, 1 in 4 children in America comes from an immigrant household. Overlapping statistic, 1 in 4 is Hispanic. So it's a big part of our country. A little bit about Hispanic youth in Memphis. From those days when there were basically no Hispanic folks in Memphis at all, to today, there's been a great change, great growth in population. By the way, there are 2 seats right up front, if you want to come up. So I was thinking about how to tell you about this. So the next slide will kind of illustrate this. All right, this is AutoZone Park, the Redbird Stadium. The capacity of the park is currently 10,000. And so if you took all the Hispanic students in Memphis, asked them to board buses, drove them downtown to the stadium, and you said, please start filling the seats, they would fill all the seats. They would fill every seating capacity of the 10,000, and you'd have 3,000 kids standing outside. So there's approximately, according to the latest data, 13,000 Hispanic kids in Shelby County schools, That's more than 1 in 10 percent. Excuse me, more than 1 in 10 of all kids, and they're a big part of our city's future. So the challenge is that historically Hispanic youth have completed college at lower rates than other racial and ethnic groups. And so if you have a growing Hispanic population, the challenge is to make sure that they advance and do well. So basically I set out with this idea that it's a good thing for people to learn and be educated. And so what the book is about is it's basically about human potential. It's what I'm saying is that there's a great generation of children of immigrants growing up in America. These children have great potential, and we as a society should help them develop their potential for the good of all. So I wanted to tell this through a microcosm. So does one of our younger visitors, can someone tell me what a microcosm is? One of the kids here. Okay, or one of the adults. Would an adult like to take a crack at this?
A small example or a small area?
Yes, it's a small example of the big world, right? So microcosm is a little universe. So I wanted to write about a microcosm here in Memphis. So the microcosm that I chose was Kingsbury High School. That's the front of the high school, and it was built in the 1950s, and it was built at a time when it was a majority white neighborhood. It was a segregated school, and with changes in our city, it became a school that's known for a very large immigrant population as well as children of immigrants. So these were the demographics of Kingsbury in 2013. As you can see, the biggest group was Hispanic kids. Excuse me, this is the Hispanic portion. That Hispanic portion is now around 50% and may have crossed 50%. This is Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller is the former principal of Kingsbury High School. And I went to him and said, I want to do a journalism project where I hang out inside Kingsbury High School for a year. And I want to just hang out and document what happens inside the school. He said yes. And because he said yes, I got to be in the school for a year. So I had full access to everything, basically saw everything that happened. And that was 2012, 2013, and then after that, I kept up with a lot of students for a couple of years. This is Margot Aleman. She is a counselor at Streets Ministries. She was the first person to introduce me to students. So a lot of people have asked me, why did I choose to write about Isaias? So the reason is that my big theme is about the potential of children of immigrants. And what I liked about Isaias' story was, here's someone who has tremendous potential, and he's trying to decide what he's going to do. So his story mirrored that of the broad population. So next slide, please. This is Isaias and his brother Dennis painting houses. They have been doing this in their family business for many years. And this was Isaias at school doing a chemistry experiment. And to tell you a bit more about him, he had scored a 29 on the ACT, which is better than 93% of kids in the U.S. And he got a high score in advanced placement calculus as a junior. He was also captain of the Knowledge Bowl team and went on TV as representing his school, Kingsbury. Next slide, please. Okay, and so he's trying to decide what he's going to do. Is he going to go to college? Is he going to paint houses? And so I pretty much followed him on his journey as he was working this out. Next slide. So also another reason I wanted to write about him is because his story fit into the bigger story I wanted to tell about Mexican immigration, which is the largest immigration in our country's history. The editor of the book asked me, hey, are you sure about that? Is it true that What about Germans? What about Italians? And I checked, and it's actually true that the immigration from Mexico is the biggest immigration that's ever taken place in U.S. history. So this is Isaias is there with a cat. Dennis is on the right, and their mother Christina is on the left. And this was in Mexico before they came. Now, I've been referring to Isaias as a child of immigrants. That's true. It's also true that in some ways you could think of him as an immigrant himself, because he came when he was 8. This is a picture that Isaias' father took. This was at Shelby Farms, and this was, I really love the picture because it sort of illustrates this arrival in a new world. It looks like the moon, but yeah, I really love the photo. Okay, so I'll tell you about how I followed Isaiah. So as a reporter, I often carry around a notebook like this. So I would literally follow this young man and others around the school, in their classrooms, and I went with him on painting projects, or I followed his family in painting projects. I didn't help paint, sorry about that. And when they went on college tours, I would go with them. And so basically what I was doing was immersion journalism, where I would write down things as they happened. I'd write down what people said to each other. And the thing is, I had permission to do all this. I had permission from the school system and from the parents of the young people involved as well. So, for example, this was Isaias and Patricia Henderson, one of the counselors at the school. As they're working out his future and his decisions, I was there documenting it. This is Isaias walking home his younger brother Dustin from school. Dustin was born in the U.S., so he's not in the early photos that I showed you. He was actually the only member of the family to be born in the U.S. And also, Isaias is a musician. He does, in this case, keyboard. He was playing in a band called Los Psychosis. And it's a good band. They played punk rock, rockabilly. I could sing a lot of the songs, but I think I'm going to spare you guys that. So, as I mentioned, I walk around with these notebooks with my observations. I gathered quite a pile of them. And then I wrote this book, this newspaper article. This was 2013. And so in the book, which is just coming out, I tell some other stories about Kingsbury. The newspaper article focused strictly on Isaias, but in the book I had a lot more room to expand and tell other stories as well. So I'll show you just one photo to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So these 3 guys, I wrote about them in the book. This photo is actually in the book. And one of the people in this picture actually ended up meeting President Obama and going to the White House. But I won't tell you who it is. You have to read the book for that. Okay, so the theme of the book, again, is human potential, saying that children of immigrants have a lot of potential, and that we as a society should help them develop it. And that's this is the cover image from the book. The photographer Karen Folk took that, and I think it's evocative of him making a decision and trying to choose his own way. All right, so that's it for now, and I guess we'll be signing books, and thanks for coming. Appreciate it.